Hello, Henrik Knudsen again, and this is a second screencast on TSIS business models, strategy and innovation from 2010 in long range planning. And the next question I would like to address is concerning segmentations and individuals in the figure 2 in the article. And interestingly enough, here is to segment the market. I'm very clear on this with creating value propositions. My question is, I ponder whether essentially each individual, if we really went down to it minutely, then each individual would have their own DNA or their understanding of the customer perceived value. So this would initially be individual, but we try to aggregate it in manageable sizes. Question is to which extent that the access to the internet is able to make these segments smaller and smaller, and eventually just come with the proposition: you as an individual are our most important customer. In that way, addressing each individual as a unique segmentation. Emphasizing this Internet of Things is also on the next page 183, where we have this part where we're actually with Blockbuster and how they left the market, and showing how this click and pay has indeed taken over the brick and clay. So buildings as such don't matter. It's the clicking and the value propositions on the internet that are proving more and more valuable. Another great example would be Airbnb. My question is, when is the brick and clay in shopping centres going to be taken over by click and pay? It's on the move, but it's still on a very short scale. When will it topple and absolutely take over the market? I'm quite sure these online supermarkets are very aware of this possibility in their business model and their business plans. Next part addresses the executive CEO's dilemma, or lack of attention, should I say, because lack of attention is very much the case when let's just find it, when executives think of innovation, they neglect the analysis of the business model. So they think the technological innovation itself is sufficient, but it's not. Whichever technological innovation you make, it must always be thought into the business context. Essentially, figuring out how to deliver value to the customers, i.e. a technological innovation, but also to capture value while doing so. So how are we going to deliver some value and be able to capture it, i.e. make some profit to the organization directly or indirectly, which is all lies in designing a business model. And then when we have the model, put some beef onto it, put the details, the organizational details onto it, and then we have a business plan. And then there's this interesting quote with licensing will only work with strong intellectual property rights. Otherwise, the licensee will walk away with it. Another interesting aspect here is focus on the value chain, and I would like to draw the attention to Dabble and Fjellsted that also have the concepts of value shop and value network. So we have to work with all three. We have to work with the value chain, the value shop, and the value network. Three different ways of creating value. Where the value chain is more typical for the industrial area, and value shop more typical for the service area. And This comes round to the bottom here, again addressing the question of services. Bundled provision of complementary products and services. Always remember the services. Services is becoming increasingly important in the customer perceived value. When it's important in the customer perceived value, services must be included into the business model and the business plan. When these CEOs tend to focus on technological innovation itself, what they're looking at is they're looking at classical revenue models as taught in economics. And in this way, when they're looking at revenue models, they're actually neglecting how they're capturing value from the technology and how they're going to get paid for it, i.e., which is the essence of the business model. Moving into another very interesting historical aspect, it's good old Thomas Edison, and he's mentioned here with some of the cases. Direct current instead of alternating current. In my opinion, Thomas Edison, he was absolutely a genius in inventions, and he was mediocre in negotiation. In his understanding of business, he was devastatingly poor. So genius in innovation, relationships, negotiations, mediocre, business understanding, absolutely appalling. And this makes me reflect that some individuals are absolutely outstanding in developing, others in negotiation, the third in looking at the business perspectives and selling. And each organization must be very attentive to this fact, so that you use people's competencies as best possible. If they're innovators, let them innovate, and then link them to the salespeople, the marketing, and the negotiators that are taking part in the relational. So don't put it all in there, don't expect it all to be under the same cap, but diversify it, make them use their competencies, and then in some way assemble it, and in that way create value. The next part is actually very much a way, as I mentioned previously, the part of our paradigm. And we have it here. Changing the firm's business model involves changing the paradigm. To a certain extent, yes, but it's extremely important to try and understand what is the paradigm of the business. Each company has its own paradigm. Each company has its own logic. Olympia, initially making typewriters, they thought they were making a machine to type letters, i.e. typewriters. They were not. What they actually were doing, the value proposition they were giving was organizations' ability to produce documents. Had this been their paradigm, they would have been able to make the transformation into the printers that relieved the typing machine. But they thought they were making a machine instead of thinking the paradigm is we're making it possible for individuals and organizations to make documents. Had they had this paradigm, they would have been able to make the transformation into printers. Same goes for a company like Xerox. They thought they were making machines to copy, where actually they were not making machines to copy. They were giving organizations capabilities of duplicating documents, papers. So reflect on it and really, really try to work with this paradigm perspective. It's so immensely important for understanding business models. 5 minutes yet left. I'll speed through it. This part, very important also. It's a question of understanding the dynamics in business models. So business models, business plans are very dynamic units. And then when it gets to a new business model isn't just made overnight. It's very much a question of pioneering, trial and error. So this trial and error says, well, how can we make trial and error in a closed environment, i.e. not toppling the market, or destabilizing the market, or giving some insecurity to our customers. How can we, with our business model, business plan, create some ways of testing it without actually going full force into the market? And then being attentive when you have a business model and a business plan, they must they refer to each other. So all the blocks in the building, the business model, they are directly or indirectly connected. There's like one large machine. They're all you may not be able to see the connection initially, but there is a connection throughout in the whole organization. Next step is again what I initially find so important: deep truth about customers' really value. So what is the essential CPV, customer perceived value? It's so tricky to work with, and it's so important, and it's so acutely necessary to be able to distinguish the customer perceived value, i.e. what the customers perceive, to the value proposition, what the organizations think they're selling. I'd like to address a question down here concerning lateral and vertical integration. Both lateral and vertical integration. And lateral integration, if we take Ryanair for example, lateral integration is not just looking at the flight in the airport, but also looking how do they get there, how to get away, trains, cars, after the flight, hotels, etc. So this is the lateral. The vertical integration is making sure the flights and the airports and the crew, etc., all are aligned. So just make sure you know the difference between lateral and vertical integration. 1 minute left. Let's make the best of it. So the last minute, I have 3 issues I would like to draw attention to. The first one is looking at this: should a solution to a problem or merely a gimmick, gizmo? I think it's good to say we have a gizmo, but it also solves a problem. Because if you go out and say it only solves a problem, then they start comparing. The next part is concerning making it applicable. A business model is not just a notion or abstract. It can only be determined by making it specific. Next part is being very careful and concerned about the question that when you have a company, a business model, then it's you have existing suppliers, customers, alliances, etc. So it can be difficult to make complete changes in a business model. And finally here, with the different literatures that do not recognize business models. Thank you.